less than 24 hours after we said that,
Yeah.
this was announced.
Yeah, right after that.
It
yeah.
was really uncanny. It was like, wow.
Yeah.
Look at that.
And once again, this story that we're going to show, this is more, is from Gravitas, from the channel that we just saw just a minute ago. And so their view is a little bit different than the American narrative, but pretty darn close. This is, people are starting to look, the NATO and all of these people are starting to look at this time and think, whoa, man, this is a dangerous thing. And of course, we know that historically, most of you that have, well, I wouldn't say most of you, because I don't know how many people you guys are listening that are new tonight, but historically, the only country that was mighty enough at one time to really compare to the United States that we can remember, that we can know of, is the USSR before it fell. This was a mighty, huge country. Of course, they killed off millions of those people. But these countries have been building in the background. We've seen them building in their education. We've seen them building in their numbers militarily. We've seen that they've hungered because, look, we've lived in good times. And when a nation lives in good times for a very long time, they become weak because they've been comfortable. And these people have not been comfortable. They've had a really rough go at it, and they've had, their education has increased, their national money has increased, whereas America's has faltered. And like David said, we have a two-front funding going on right now. We're going to be funding Israel. We're going to be funding Ukraine. And Iran's also funding proxies all over the world. So a lot of this Bible prophecy is going to come together and show you exactly what's going on to kind of clarify it. Now, there's so many stories. As I said, there's so many stories, but there's a truth behind all of this that we're going to clarify. But let's watch this video right here, and this is very short.
About a new alliance, one that should not surprise you, but it should concern you, especially if you are watching us from India or the West. Why? Because the members of this new alliance are 1, China, 2, Iran, and 3, Moscow. We are calling this alliance Chim. We took the liberty of naming this alliance because we are convinced that its members will never name their relationship. Forget that. They won't even acknowledge the alliance. But that's where we come in. Gravitas tells you stories which others won't. And tonight we will tell you about this new strategic map that is being drawn. This new strategic triangle. There are 3 big stories coming in from Chim. 1, China is looking to triple its nuclear warheads. I repeat, triple. 2, China is building a railway line extremely close to the Indian border. The line connects Tibet to Xinjiang. It is also China's road to Gwadar. That brings me to development number 3. Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi is visiting China tomorrow, the 14th of February. This Valentine's Day, China and Iran are shoring up ties. What do countries separated by continents have to gain by coming together? And why do we think that Chim, or China, Iran, and Moscow, are coming closer? Let's start by answering the latter first. Here are some recent developments. In September, Iran signed a memorandum to join the SCO, or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a body which often criticized as being nothing more than a talk shop for both China and Russia. And Iran is now its member. In November, the top Russian security officials visited Iran. Who were these officials? For one, Russia's national security chief and Russia's Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev, a man who is extremely close to none other than the Russian President Vladimir Putin himself. So why would Russia...
So this kind of, these videos are up for anybody to see, but this kind of shows this path that's being taken. And interestingly, well, I mean, it's no surprise to me by now, of course, after this many years, but the Bible tells us exactly what we're witnessing at this moment. And David, you did a broadcast, and I just talked about that, called The Willful King in the book of Daniel. And this broadcast was in 2019 of June 23rd. So we're talking 5 years ago that you did this video, almost 5 years ago, almost pretty close to 5 years.
Yeah.
And so you've been talking about this for a while, and to see it a lot of people actually gave you flack over some of the stuff you said about it because people wanted to propagate Iran, which is weird to me because I know Iran has gone through a lot of really horrifying things for the citizens there. But the things that you said are coming true, and because it's in the Bible. So tell us a little. Actually, tell us a lot about Iran and Bible prophecy. This is something that I want to hand over to you for a minute so that we can get a full scope of this, because there's a lot of people here tonight specifically to hear about this, and also the red heifer. But this is very important that people understand what we might be seeing, because when you can see what's happening, I think that it dampens the fear at least a little bit to be able to know what's coming. At least for me, it does. I like to see what's coming. If I can flip the light switch on down a creepy hallway, I prefer that, rather than not. So
and it definitely dates me, but I believe I've been teaching this for almost 30 years. And the longer I live, the more real and the more confirmation that comes. And in Daniel 11 is where we read of the willful king, and it talks about the king of the south and the king of the north. And this insightful young lady talked about the Chim, the China, Russia, and the Iran alliance. And basically we see here the uniting of the kingdom of Tartaria. We see Tartaria ran from the area there of the Ukraine all the way to the sea there into Chinese Tartaria. And we're seeing not long ago, Vladimir Putin went to Xi Jinping and said, I embrace your vision for the New World Order. And Putin basically kissed the ring of Xi Jinping and inaugurated him as the king of the South.
Yeah.
And in geopolitics, you can look up, they talk about the global North, which is basically your G7 nations, and the global South, which is basically your third world countries. And this is Daniel 11. We have the king of the North, which is your G7 countries, Britain, the United States. Then you have the global South. And no doubt Xi Jinping is the king of the South. And we see this prophetically coming into this end-time conflict. And for many, many, many years, I have been saying that the king of the South is Iran. And it really seems to be the case. Now, we had, when we did our Midnight Ride on Tartaria, right on the eve of the announcement of this Chim of the Chinese and the Iranian alliance, we had three confirming witnesses. We had Daniel 11, and we also had the book of Enoch. In the book of Enoch, in chapter 56 and the 5th verse, and it says, in those days the angels shall return and hurl themselves to the east upon the Parthians and Medes. Now the Parthians, this is in Iran. They're the Iranians today. They shall stir up the kings so that a spirit of unrest shall come upon them, and they shall rouse from their thrones, that they may break forth lions from their lairs, and as hungry wolves among their flock, and they shall go up and tread underfoot the land of his elect ones. Specifically prophesying that these Parthians, Iran, is going to come into Israel in the last days.
You want to know something? One of the slogans that they're saying in Iran is something about biting the tail of the lion, and which is crazy. And as we know as well, Iran also is where we get the word Aryan, right? Or Iran comes from Aryan. And Aryan is like Aries, the lion. Aries, Aryan has the lion symbolism, which we've talked about before too, because at one time King Og of Bashan was the ruler of the Aryan kingdoms. Pretty amazing.
Yeah. And we've got another confirming witness in 2 Esdras 15. And if any, and I tell you what, last week's Midnight Ride was very good, even if me and John did do it. It was a real good. We give you a lot of insight there into these Jewish apocalyptic books, which the Midnight Ride tonight shows how important they are. Let's have another confirming witness from 2 Esdras. And let's look at the 15th chapter. And we'll read in verse 29, when the nations of the dragons of Arabia, well, I wonder who the dragon might be. And this is specifically stated to be coming from the east. Pretty definitive. It says, they shall come out with many chariots, and the multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon the earth, that all they which hear them may fear and tremble. Also the Carmanians, raging in wrath, shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood, and with great power shall they come and join in battle with them. So here we see the Carmanians joining with the dragons of the east, coming from the east, and they shall lay waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. Now, in the height of the Assyrian Empire, it took over the whole area of the Levant there. Now, who are these Carmanians? I'll read the footnote here in the Oxford Annotated Bible. It says, the Carmonians from Carmania, Kerman, the southern province of the Parthian Empire. Chim, the Carmanians in the second estrus, and the Parthians in the book of second estrus, they're the same people. It's Iran. Well, let's have another confirming witness, and this is one that I've never talked about before. I just discovered this week. I have two new confirmations to this that we didn't have in 2019 or in the last time we did our Tartaria broadcast. But in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the War Scroll, it talks about the war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. Now, in the War Scrolls from the caves of Qumran, it says that the leaders of the sons of darkness will be an entity they call the king of Kittim, another name for Assyria, and this land of the Assyrian Empire at its height, which took in the entire Levant. I'll read just a little bit here. This is on page 189 of the Giza Vermes edition. And in the book I referenced quite a bit last week, The Method and Message of Jewish Apocalyptic, it put me onto this because it said that the War Scrolls was a commentary on Daniel 11. I thought, oh boy, here we go. Here we go.
Interesting.
It says, the prince of the congregation, which was written about in the book of Ezekiel the prophet, I will strike your bow from your left hand and will make your arrows drop from your right. On the mountains of Israel you shall fall. The king of the Kittim, the prince of the congregation, will pursue them as far as the great sea. And it talks right in Daniel 11. We'll read it, how that it talks here in second Esdras and Enoch, and now in this source in Daniel 11, how this willful king is going to go right up to the sea. It's a quadruple confirmation here.
David, I got a question. What does it say about the arrows in there? Say that again.
Okay, and it says here, and here it begins quoting Ezekiel 38 and 39. Then it goes to Daniel 11. It says, the prince of the congregation and all Israel, which was written in the book of Ezekiel the prophet, I will strike your bow from your left hand and will make your arrows drop from your right hand. On the mountains of Israel you shall fall.
So we're talking about the arrows flying through the air type thing. That kind of does, we're in Jeremiah 39. I don't know if you've got that verse.
Yes,
You're going to
sir.
talk about it, but it talks about the bow, breaking the bow in that area as well, exactly where you're talking about in, I'll have to remember here, let me look here, in Elam, which is territorially the exact same spot. So
Same place.
Same place.
All three names for the same place.
Interesting.
And it goes on in the War Scrolls. It says, the king of the Kittim, the prince of the congregation, will pursue them as far as the great sea, and they shall flee from before Israel. In that time he shall stand against them, and they shall be stirred against them. The same word, it talks about stirring them up in Enoch. The language is so similar in all of these. And they shall return to the dry land in that time, and they shall bring him, the king of Kittim, before the prince of the congregation. The branch of David will kill him by strokes and by wounds, and a priest of renown will command the slain to the Kittim.
Wow.
Fascinating.
Fascinating.
It is just absolutely fascinating. And you can read that entire chapter in the book of Enoch, and it talks about how that they go all the way to the sea and right up to the Temple Mount. Then something happens and they're driven out. And we see the same scenario in the War Scrolls. We see it in Second Esdras, and I'll give you the chapter. It's Enoch, chapter 56. Now, is this all a coincidence? Well, I what I believe about coincidences. And in the 49th chapter of the book of Jeremiah, which John referenced, and this is really profound. And in all of these passages, the sequence is on the very final battle. Yeah, it's going to the Messiah come back and waste this guy. And it puts it at the very end of time in the final war, like in the War Scroll of Qumran, of the war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness.
Yeah.
Now, Jeremiah 49. Now, we don't want to miss this. And the young lady from the Indian News Network actually showed a picture of this. The nuclear facility, one of their major ones, that is just almost on top of the ancient palace of Shushan, which we read about in the book of Esther. And it says here in Jeremiah 49, beginning in verse 36, "And upon Elam will I bring the four winds from the four quarters of heaven." Now, remember how Revelation 7 starts out. Four angels holding back the four winds of heaven until the sealed of God have the seal put on their forehead. We're talking about the removal of the restrainer. In Enoch chapter 56, it talks about the release of the fallen angels. And when they're released, they're going to stir up Iran. You know, we've just got it all here. So it's going to be the four winds that will from heaven, and will scatter them toward all those winds, and there shall be no nation whither the outcast of Elam shall come. They're going to get smoked. For I will cause Elam to be dismayed before their enemies, and before them that seek their life, and I will bring evil upon them, even my fierce anger, saith the Lord, and I will send the sword after them till I have consumed them. And there you go. And this is... when if Israel would, and they will at one point in time, declare war on Iran, this would be one of their top 3 targets right here, I guarantee you. And it's right there. It's kind of an in-your-face type thing. Another thing, in the book, The Method and Message of Jewish Apocalyptic by Mr. Russell, he gave another confirming passage. And this was from something that we keep talking about. It keeps coming up from another one of these apocalyptic books, Second Baruch. It talks about the black waters. And we see in the book of Baruch, it divides the Great Tribulation into 12 parts. If you're preterist, just skip it and forget about it. If it goes on and it talks about these 12 waters, black and white, they alternate. And in the final black water, this is what it says about it. And it talks about this final battle and this conflagration. It says in chapter 70, "Hear therefore the interpretation of the last black waters." In verse 7, "And some of them shall be destroyed by their own." And that's what I'm looking for, double cross. "Then the Most High peoples, whom he has prepared before, and they shall come and make war with the leaders that shall then be left. And it shall come to pass that whoever gets safe out of the war shall die in the earthquake, and whoever gets safe out of the earthquake shall be burned by the fire, and whoever gets safe out of the fire shall be destroyed by the famine. And it shall come to pass that whoever of the victors and the vanquished gets safe out of and escapes all these things aforesaid will be delivered into the hands of my servant the Messiah, for all the earth shall devour its inhabitants." Wow. And Second Baruch, just like the War Scrolls, it sees the Messiah doing the final smackdown on this group of individuals. Now, when we put it to the primary Bible text is in the book of Daniel. And let's turn and let's read in the book of Daniel. And there are things here, there is so much cognitive dissonance among people when they read Scripture. When they read the Word of God, they can't really hear what the Bible's saying. They're going to hear what their favorite preacher said about it. And there's some things here in Daniel 11 that are just right in our face. Now, and as I said, Daniel 11 is the chapter. It talks about the king of the north, king of the south, which is exactly this final alliance. And this is exactly the way this final confrontation, the two sides are being identified as the global north and the global south. Well, let's read a little text here in Daniel chapter 11. And let's start here in verse 37. Let's just read verse 37, a little text here. This is concerning, well, in verse 36, and the king shall do according to his will. That's why I'm very clever. I called him the willful king, because he does according to his will. Now, 100 out of 100 dispensational Bible teachers are going to tell you that this is the first beast of Revelation 13. I'm going to show you that's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. And let's just read. It goes on and says in verse 38, but in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver, and with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. Yeah, and at that time, and at the time of the end, shall the king of the south push at him, hello, Jijing, and come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. He shall also enter into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. Now, this would be the modern country of Jordan. And this guy, we're not describing a world ruler here. We're describing a guy that's going to invade Israel, and he's not even going to be able to take even all of the Levant. He's not going to be able to touch what would be the modern nation of Jordan. In verse 42, it says, he shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver. Now, that's one you want to watch. And, well, I could go on a big rant, how the dollar's going south, and how all the globalists, they're buying the gold and silver. Yeah, that's right. And it says, this willful king will have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his step. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace. And that word tabernacle there, if you look it up in the Hebrew, it means a really, really nice portable tent. Like these sultans you see in the movies, that they have these really elaborate tents that are nicer than a lot of houses. But it says he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. He's going to go right to the Temple Mount. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. He is going to get smacked down. He's going to go into Israel. He's going to tear them up. He's going to go right up to the Temple Mount. He's going to, and quite possibly, set up some kind of a portable tent there. Who knows? But don't look for the Dome of the Rock to go anywhere. I'll just give you a tip on that. But he's going to come into his end. He dies right here. Now, look at 12:1. And at that time, that shows us timing. At the time the willful king dies, shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the people of thy people, for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was. The great tribulation begins after this guy dies. He can't be the first beast of Revelation 13. It's clear as day. All we have to do is read our Bibles, but yet over and over and over, Daniel 11 is totally misrepresented. And what the preterists say, oh, it's all fulfilled, don't worry, it ain't going to happen. And the pre-tribbers say, well, don't worry, it ain't going to happen till after the rapture when that beast is revealed. But what we want to understand, it's happening right now. Daniel 11 is straight ahead, it's in her face. These things are unmistakable earmarks. They're just unmistakable signals to us that this is the truth. And more confirmation comes all the time. I'm as convinced about this as I am about anything. There's too much confirmation here.
It's interesting too. There's so many proxies that Iran has been working with up to this point. I think almost all of the wars that are being fought, whether there's little military sects in Syria or whether they're in Palestine, they are all proxy military groups funded by Iran. And what's crazy, you talked about them gathering the gold and silver. They have so much money they've paid, according to one guy that was on a show, Sean Ryan show. He was talking about how they pay people to come over. Them in Saudi Arabia, a couple people pay people that are here in the United States and help fund mosques and do all these different things here. So we have, and just in the last year, not to fearmonger, but we've had millions of military-age men coming over from foreign countries that could very well be part of these proxies. We have an election coming up when historically, when elections come up, at least in the last few years, there has been an uprise in violent incidents, at least within our own borders. And a lot of this stuff, I think that could set off a chain of events, not just there, because the United States is mentioned in their rhetoric too as being an enemy. And I could see the possibility of violence erupting, maybe even worldwide, but at least possibly in the United States as well. What do you think about that?
Well, absolutely. And where'd they get the money from? Thank you, Barack Obama. Yeah. And way back when they had the nuclear treaty, and I can't remember the figure, someone in the chat probably knows, a crazy amount of money that the United States paid Iran to sign that nuclear treaty. The minute Trump got in, he broke the whole thing. Yeah. But I mean, they had a crazy amount of money. And this is such a fact that, something like you see these mosques being built, and they're really big, nice buildings, and they don't have that many people in them. Yeah. Well, these are being bankrolled, and they're being bankrolled right from Saudi Arabia. And of course, we could go on and on. We have Mr. Obama bringing in the refugees from Sudan into Minnesota, and now we've got Mullah Umar up there as a representative. And, there's a plan to this. Yeah. There's a plan. The plan is destroy America. Destroy America. Take it down like Babylon without firing a shot. And this is just another big step. Bankrupt America, $90 billion. Oh, if we don't... one thing about it, all of these wars, if America would quit paying for all of them, we might have a few less wars. That's my silly idea here.
Yeah.
If they want to kill each other, let them pay for it themselves.
It's one of those things that when you look at it from a perspective of somebody who's trying to make sense of everything, it doesn't make sense. No. There's nothing on paper that'll lead you to be like, oh, I get why this is happening. Or I get why we're spending billions of dollars on this country when our country is really just going to dumps, and how much debt we're in. I mean, if I ran my household in the same way our country runs its pocketbook, if I run our pocketbook, my family's pocketbook in the same way that our country's running the pocketbook, and then I let's say I'm in debt for whatever amount of money, and I only make not even half of that money already, I'm already not making it, then I decide to go and help David. I'm going to send $10,000 to you, David, instead of paying my own debts, instead of taking care of my own house. I'm going to send you $10,000 so you can get a brand new rifle or whatever. It just doesn't make sense financially to anybody that has a head on their shoulders, and one can only imagine what the real motive behind it all is. I mean, I could sit here and think about what is actually going on or say it even, but it doesn't mean that I know for a fact, but it looks a certain way. I don't think these guys are stupid. So if they're not stupid, there must be another reason behind all of this. And I think we all know, but it's just amazing that people are looking at this thing and they're truly waiting for some kind of theater presentation. It's almost like a WCW event for people. But when the bodies start hitting the floor and people start seeing blood for the first time, they start seeing people that they know brutally murdered, I think it's going to start sinking in that it is theater, but it's very violent and bloody theater at the same time.
Yeah.
So, and the reason I say theater is because it's all been written before, right here in the scriptures. It's been written. The script has been written, and it's being acted out right in front of our face.
We got the left-hand path, and here again we go back to the book of Enoch. We got the second Esdras, with the two heads and the eagle in the middle, the right head eating the left.
Yep.
And we've got the left-hand path in America and the right-hand path. They'll fight like cats and dogs, but they all want the final agenda. They all want to have that final New World Order, but they're going to fight like cats and dogs over who runs it.
Yeah.
And it's a minute, and I'll just say this because I just got to. But, here we got the supposed MAGA Republicans, and they're going to hold the line on this spending bill. Bless their hearts. Now, who comes along and comes up with the idea? Well, let's give it to Mr. Zelensky. We'll make it alone.
Yeah.
Lindsey Graham and Donald Trump. Then they bring the Speaker Johnson down and, we'll make it alone. Like they're ever going to pay back a dime of it? Really?
Yeah.
Like when they're tired of shooting their cannons off, they're going to think about us good old Americans and write us a check. Gotta be kidding. Gotta be kidding.
Yeah.
So Trump carried the ball across the line for him.
Yeah, and not only was it written about in the scripture that this is going to happen, there's also a letter from Albert Pike to Mazzini. For some of you guys have heard this letter before. It was in London Museum for a very long time. Some say it's still there. And this is the letter. I just want to show you guys this because it foretells the first two world wars that have already happened. They hadn't happened at the time. But then it tells the Third World War that we are actually experiencing. I believe this is what is getting ready to take place, and this is what we're seeing in the Bible. So here we go. Check this out. And First World War, he says, must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia. And this was the Prince Michael, what was the names of these people? I can't remember right now. These were the palace they had in St. Petersburg. They had this beautiful palace. The Romanovs had these beautiful palaces, and some people believed that this was the end of Tartaria. Some people believed that these kingships that were such predominant at the time, when the communists came in and took that over, this was World War I. This is when we saw the Bolsheviks. We saw a lot of different stuff. What else can we say about World War I, David? I know you weren't around during that, but what else can we say and how accurate this is about World War I?
Well, it's absolutely accurate. This was the rise of the Bolshevik Revolution, and it was also the beginning of the Balfour Declaration, which began to pave the way for the nation of Israel to become a state. So this is absolutely spot on. There ain't no doubt about it that this happened, and this letter was definitely in the British Museum, and I've got a lot of confirmation on this, and I have one of the books I have is by a Roman Catholic cardinal from Argentina that talked about going there. This book was written before it was taken out, and he goes there and talks about this letter.
Wow.
And Yeah, and now it's been taken off display. I wonder why. But yeah, many people read this and confirmed that it was there. It most definitely was.
All right, so the Second World War we have that talk about, everybody knows about World War II. I'm just going to read this to you because it's interesting the way it's worded here. It said it must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascist and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would be then restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm. Now let's go on to number 3 here. This is where we are at as we speak right now. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the agentur of the Illuminati, between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the State of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will become constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. We're seeing that right now. We shall unleash the nihilist, the atheist, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an idea, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. So we see this agenda not only laying out the last war, but what they expect to come out of this war. And we've seen through the Scottish Rite their motto, order out of chaos. We see that there are occult teachings that speak on this Hegelian dialect where you can have two sides opposing each other, as David was talking about the right-handed path and the left-handed path. We see this agenda unleashed onto America and other countries. David, just talk a little bit about this statement here and how huge that this agenda has been played out that we can see.
All right. And I'll try to walk softly here.
Yeah, walk softly. We've got people that get offended and hurt by
and
things.
this is, I guarantee it's going to offend people. There's no doubt that the establishment of Israel in 1948 was a prophetic event. It's something that God allowed, or it wouldn't have happened. But at the same time, when you read here the verbiage of Mr. Pike and Mr. Mazzini, who took over the Illuminati after Adam Weishaupt, you can see that the creation of Israel was the plan of the Illuminati. It was, we could say a lot about the Rothschild involvement in it, but the nation of Israel was created, and Zionism, we talked about C.I. Scofield and how he was financed, this guy that wasn't even paying child support. He belonged to one of the elite clubs there in New York where many millionaire and billionaire Jews went that financed C.I. Scofield. Why would they do that? We talked about the Tavistock Foundation funding dispensationalism and the pre-trib position. Why? Because Zionism will be the flashpoint of the final war. Zionism has to exist for this hatred to continue between the Zionists and the Muslim people. They're both being used as pawns in the game. And for the Israel of God, and I'm not here saying this evening that it's right. Israel has a right to have a country. They have a right to defend themselves. And I'm not saying anything like that, that they don't. But we have to realize that they are not the nation of God just because of their genetics.
Yeah.
And this is a creation to use as a flashpoint for the final conflict, which we've talked about in all of these scriptures tonight and these other confirmations. Right here it is. They tell you their plan right there. And, it might be good for us to believe that they mean what they say. And you can see these first two world wars just as planned. And you can see World War III here, according to the Illuminati plan, it's coming off without a hitch.
It's so true. And David, it is an hour. We've been an hour, and I'm not halfway through some of the stuff that I wanted to bring up. So I'm going to ask you, first off, since you're here and we're live right now, do you want to continue this show? And then I'm going to ask the audience, would you like us to continue? Because this could mean another 30 minutes to an hour. So, David, I want to ask you first, since you kind of have the say since you're here.
Well, I say let's cap it here, and like I say, there's so much here we can talk about to come back and talk about next week, the red heifer. And why don't we see? I just bet there's some people in the chat that might have some questions. Let's maybe take a couple questions and then pick it up and finish it up next week. What do you think? I
think I'm in agreement, because I do have, and it could take more than an hour, the rest of what I presented. I usually try to keep our shows in a certain period of time, because I know that after a certain period of time it does become hard for both of me and David, because after a certain period of time you're not going to get much out of us after that. So
we go 2 hours, I could be starting some new doctrines or something.
Yeah.
But and in all honesty, we present a tremendous amount of documentation, layered spiritual truths. And it's hard to maintain an intensity of focus, not only in teaching it, but also in receiving it.
Yeah.
So I think it might be good to just take a breath, reflect on this. I know a lot of people say, well, we listened to that 2 or 3 times, and I can understand why. So let's just take a breath and let's just see what's on the mind of the folks in the chat, because I know this is, in these times, it's an uneasiness. And like the other night, right before we recorded, Dean, I said, well, is this it? Are we going to, are the taters going to roll here? And it didn't. But one of these days, the taters are going to roll.
The taters are indeed going to roll.
And they are.
And I have to say that I am thankful to be able to present this. And we were going to speak on the red heifer, which I'll just give you guys a little insight into what we're going to be talking about next week when me and David come back and speak on these subjects. But the red heifer sacrifice, something that is started in Numbers 19. You can read about it there, about the sacrifice, about how the ashes were intended to purify the people. And this hasn't been done for thousands of years. This is actually the last time, according to what I've read, the last time it was done was when Herod's temple was built. There's a lot building up to this. There's many different words on this. I don't think it's going to happen on Passover, because it's not a normal sacrifice that they would do, and so they wouldn't do that on the Sabbath. I don't think it's going to happen. I think we have time before they're going to do it to be able to do this show. I think that it's important they're going to do it correctly, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And there's some very powerful people that would love for nothing more than for a temple to be built right there on that mound. And then there's people that would do anything, including possibly shoot missiles towards a site in order to keep that from happening, or maybe even march in to the Temple Mount and set up camp. What do you think, David?
I think that's the teaser right there. I mean, this thing unpacks in all kinds of different directions, and tune in next week, and we'll go full meal deal on the red heifer.
All right, so I'm going to ask this question because I see it. First one I see popping up, the chat's moving so fast, it's making my head spin. Gloria says, what about praying for Jerusalem, praying for the peace of Jerusalem, which we're commanded to do. What do you think about that, David?
It's biblical, and I was talking about this Friday night. Yes, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And the average person in Israel is much like the average person in America or the average person in Russia. They don't give a doodle about all these geopolitical moves for control. You know, the average Jewish person isn't into all kinds of evil. You know, they're victims and they're pawns in the game, you know, just like we are. And God has a remnant in Israel today. And we read in the book of Zechariah how that 1/3 are going to come through the fire. We've talked about this a lot of times. So absolutely, we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, because one day Lord Jesus is going to return and he's going to gather us back there. His foot's going to hit the Mount of Olives and split that rascal right down the middle.
That's right, man. And me for one, I'm just on looking. I see so many horrible things going on in the world to so many innocent people. Thankfully, we've been blessed where we're at. We've been super blessed, and we've had nothing but we almost live in a slice of heaven on earth, you know, and that's the reality. But there are people, innocent people, being taken advantage of all around the world in a way that is horrifying if you really were to be able to witness it all. And so we do pray for peace of Jerusalem. We pray for peace of God's people. And we hope and pray that we always get a chance to do this next week. But I just want to say this. I want to say thank you to all of you who support us. Without you guys, our ministry and Now You See TV or FOJC could not do what we do. We, unlike a lot of other platforms out there, we don't get paid by Google. We don't get paid by YouTube. We don't get paid by Facebook. We don't get paid by Instagram. We don't get paid by any of these big corporations. Everything that we get paid to do, we get paid generated based off of what you guys are willing to do for us. So we're thankful for what you guys do to support us, even if that just means sharing our videos, hitting the like button, leaving a comment that's uplifting. I got the opportunity, and I love this. I just want to say this. I feel really just the need to say this, but I was eating out at a restaurant the other day, and this happens, I would say, fairly often. I'm sure it happens to David too, but somebody came up to me and they just wanted to see me, and they just started crying, and I was just I just couldn't believe it, and they apologized, and I was just saying, you don't have to apologize. You know, when if you see us, me and David, we're out there, feel free to approach us. Unless you're going to approach us angrily, then maybe you shouldn't do that. But we're thankful for you guys as much as you guys are for us. I know people say that all the time, but we really do mean that. And we hope and pray that you guys have a great Passover, great time with your family. You're praying for peace for all of you. And that's really all I have to say, David. I'll leave it to you, and you can end us out.
All right. Well, I just echo what John says to the greatest degree. We are, as you can tell by listening to the Midnight Ride, it's not a seminar on how to win friends and influence people. We give you the whole counsel of God, and it's going to offend a lot of people. The truth will offend a lot of people, and that's all right, because the truth also will find a home. And we are so thankful for all of you who the Lord has joined your hearts with ours in this fight and in this call of God to get the truth out, not only of what the Bible really says about Bible prophecy, but about the real gospel and about the real doctrine of Christ and the commandments of God, just bringing back and emphasizing just believing in all the Bible, you know, and just telling people how great that Old Testament is and how valid. So thank you. Thank you. And like John says, we couldn't do it without you. We couldn't do it without you. And thank you so much for your prayers and support. And I'll just say that we love you very much. Until next week, 10 p.m. Central. High five and good night, everybody, from the Midnight Ride.
Pound that like button.
And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up, rise up, rise up.